Welcome back to Journey to Novelist. This channel is devoted to new writers and those writers new to pursuing the goal of becoming a published author. Now, I apologize if you're listening to this and you hear some noise in the background. There are some jets flying around, so I have no control of that. But today we're going to be talking about NaNoWriMo, and more specifically Camp NaNoWriMo and the Camp NaNoWriMo for July of 2023. If you've ever participated in NaNoWriMo, you know that that is an event that happens in November where people around the world try to write 50,000 words of some sort of document, whether it is a novel, a script, or some other type of book. It could apply to NaNoWriMo, and it's a very popular event, but it can be very stressful to try to do that, to write 50,000 words in a month. If you're not that committed to a project, or you want to try something before committing to trying NaNoWriMo in November, then you do have the option of working with the Camp NaNoWriMos, which happen twice a year in April and July. Now, these events do not require you to write 50,000 words. You can basically set your own goal for the project. That could be just 1,000 words of a story. It could be, say, 3 short stories, or it could be editing 3 short stories, or editing a previous novel, finishing a novel. You get the idea. It could be just about anything. But I want to go over a few things you're going to want to do if you want to participate in a Camp NaNoWriMo, which is coming up very soon here in July. Now, the camps and all the NaNoWriMo events actually start on the first day of the month and end on the last day of the month. So step 1, if you're going to participate, is of course to brainstorm some ideas for projects to work on. Now, just first of all, just come up with a list of what you could possibly do for a project, whether that be a writing project or an editing project. Now, a writing project could be a new project. It could be a script, it could be a book, it could be some poems, it could be to finish a dissertation on something. It could be writing some speeches. Anything related to writing, that's what it could be. It could be finishing an old NaNoWriMo project or an old camp project. It could also be a project that has to do with editing a manuscript, editing some poems, finishing something up. Anything to do with writing is fair game for NaNoWriMo. So just brainstorm some ideas. Find some of your old projects that you might have started on, put those down, and just make a list. That's step 1. Because the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go over to the nanowrimo.org site if you haven't already registered, and you're going to register there, and you're going to decide on what project from that list that you've made and actually register it as a project for Camp NaNoWriMo 2023. Whenever you register it, it will ask you if you want to associate your project with a particular event, and in that case you would say make it part of the July 2023 Camp NaNoWriMo event, and it will automatically set your start and end dates for you and kind of lock you into that. Now, you're also going to be asked to define a goal to go along with your project. And the goal is basically how you're going to track your progress towards meeting whatever goal you've set for yourself. If you're planning to write 10 poems during the month, and your normal poem is 50 words long, then your goal might just be to write 500 words. So you could create that as your goal. Now, if your poems take you a long time to write, then you wouldn't actually say you wrote one until you actually finished it, in which case you could write down, every time you finish one, you could write down 50 as your tracker for that particular poem. Whether the poem was longer or shorter, if that's how you defined your goal, that's what you would do. For a writing project, it's generally pretty easy, especially if it's like a book or finishing a book, because you're actually tracking how many words. If you have an editing type of goal, then you might be looking to equate your editing with a certain number of words. Say editing a page is equivalent to writing 250 words or writing 100 words. So you'll want to keep that in mind and define your goal based on how you're going to track your goal, because that's the purpose of creating a goal on the NaNoWriMo.org site. So that's step 2, is actually to decide on a project and get it registered and have your goal set. With that said, the next part is to actually plan some time to work. We all have commitments. We have work, or we have family plans. Perhaps you have a vacation planned for July. There's 4th of July coming up if you're in the US, and that means you might have cookouts planned or different gatherings planned, and that's going to cut into the time you have to work. But you can plan your time, and you can even set your goal based on how much time you're going to have. If you're only going to have one day a week that you can work, and you only think you can do 2,000 words in a day, and you have 10 days, then obviously you're going to only be able to set your goal for 10,000 words of whatever your project is. So plan some time, pencil it in. It does not have to be set in stone. It is a loose schedule that you're trying to come up with. And having a schedule will help you actually sit down and write, especially if you have something that triggers a reminder for you to do it. So the next thing is step 4. And step 4 is really once you get working on your project, and that is to actually track your goal. Make sure you go onto the site during the month of July and put in your progress so that you can see that progress. That will help motivate you to continue to progress. It will also help you if you want to actually win the event, because there are some perks when you win an event with NaNoWriMo. Usually there's some discounts you can get. With the camp, they're not as set in stone as they are with the big NaNoWriMo event in November, but there could still be some perks to actually winning, even though it is sort of a honor system for whether or not you win or lose. But track your goal. It will help motivate you to get your project done. Now for my project, I've already set it up in NaNoWriMo as a Camp NaNoWriMo 2023 project, and I have a goal of 12,000 words. Now, where does this come from? Well, my project is for an imaginary anime series called Deck that I came up with, and I'm going to try to write an episode guide. And what this is going to entail is, I'm assuming that my imaginary anime series is 24 episodes long. That's a season of the series, and I'm going to break it down in those 24 episodes and try to explain what goes on in each episode within 500 words. So it's 500 words of a character story and what happens during each episode. And I think that will give me a good way to work on developing some characters, trying to get a cohesive arc flowing through multiple mini documents. And that comes out to 12,000 words. So 24 times 500 is 12,000 words. And so that's where I came up with my word count. Now, if my episode runs more than 500 words, it still only counts as 500 words for the purpose of this particular goal. Because basically I need to have 24 of these mini arcs for this episode guide. So that's what I've set, and I've associated, of course, my goal with the July 2023, and I'm all set to start on July 1st as to writing episode 1. Now, what can I do between now and then to prepare myself? Well, what I've done is I've actually set up a project in Babisco, and Babisco is a software that allows you to write stories, and it's free. You can find it online. All you have to do is search for it. And I have the supporters edition here. I've set up a project, and I'm going to be actually doing my writing in here, but I've got my project started, and I'm starting with some of these things where I'm going to describe what my setting is, get my background of the world that the anime takes place in. I can come up with the premise for the entire series as if the anime continues even past season 1, and what would happen if it continued past season 1. And I can come up with my locations, and I can start defining some of my characters. All of that I can work on even before the camp event starts, because when the camp event starts, I'm going to try to actually write the story. So I have a lot I could work on between now and then. Now, today is June 21st, so I have almost 10 days that I can work on getting the basics down. I can get the social structure of the world down. I can list characters and locations, objects that are important. There's a place here to put relationships between different things. There's a place I can actually start working on timeline of when events happen. And this might be a timeline that has to do with how the history of the world runs and where my particular episodes fall within that timeline. So there's a lot of things I can work on between now and then, and I have it all set up here in Babisco and ready to go. And as you can see, I've started with some premise, which is the son of a farmer goes to a big city to research crops, but ends up getting drafted into the war games and eventually becomes the ruler of the empire. Now, that is the overall premise for the entire series from start to end. Even if my particular episodes don't go that far, it's the end game. So if this ever actually becomes an anime series, try to forget what the actual end is. So that's my entire premise. And then I have here where I can start building characters, which I have not done yet. But I do know that there's a farm boy. I mean, because my premise tells me that. So there's a lot I can do. And there's a lot you can do to prepare for your story for Camp NaNoWriMo 2023 if you're going to participate. You have between now and July 1st to actually get set up. But even if it's past July, by the time you see this, or past July 1st rather, then you can still set up a project and participate in NaNoWriMo, even if it's like, maybe it's the 10th of July. Just make your goal a little shorter and you can still work on it. So I hope you join us for Camp NaNoWriMo, and I will be making updated videos as I go along. I might even try to do some live streaming here on the channel to work on some of these episodes with some prompts and things as we go through the month. I am trying to work on learning more about all this hosting stuff and putting things on YouTube. So come up with your project and join us. Register it with NaNoWriMo.org, and I hope you have fun in July.